Yolene laid in bed disappointed, ashamed, and embarrassed. She blamed it on her age. She was no longer youthful. Her skin lost its vibrance, its tightness. It was now loose and wrinkly. Her stomach was no longer flat in tone. It protruded like a beer belly and merged with her fupa. At 55 years old, Yolene was well past her prime. Yolene watched Emmett sleep as they laid in bed together. Despite her best efforts to be alluring and sexy by putting on lingerie, Emmett chose to go to sleep instead of getting freaky with her. Yolene thought that maybe if the bags under her eyes wasn't so puffy, and if the creases on her face wasn't so deep, that Emmett might have recognized the remnants of her former beauty, that he might have still been attracted to her. Emmett, who was 57 years old, was fast asleep. He had just completed a 30-year bid in maximum security prison. Tonight was his first night out as a free man. Yolene had prepared dinner before Emmett arrived at her house. She was nervous, uncertain how the night would go. But one thing was for sure, she expected Emmett to be touchy-feely. After all, he hadn't experienced the flesh of a woman in over 30 years. Emmett had kept things cordial between them, and when Yolene shed her clothes to reveal her sexy lingerie, Emmett just smiled and said, "I'm tired, baby. Maybe in the morning." And now here they were, lying in bed, Emmett asleep and Yolene staring at his face. She couldn't believe it. This was day one of their new life together. By day 31, Emmett would be dead by the hands of Yolene. Day 3. Yolene returned home from the supermarket. She had left to go buy her 3 pit bulls dog food. Her home had 3 bedrooms and 2 bathrooms. It was all on one floor, and the living room was the centralizing piece in the entire home. If you were to stand in the living room, you could see the doorways to all 3 bedrooms and straight into the kitchen. As Yolene walked through the living room towards the kitchen with the dog food, one of the bedrooms unexpectedly swings open, startling Yolene. She uttered as a man she did not recognize stepped out of the room.
"Oh, there you go, being all dramatic,"
Emmett said. Yolene heard Emmett first before she saw him. Emmett was the second person to step out of the room. "Goodness, Emmett, y'all two scared me," Yolene said.
"Ain't nothing to be scared for, woman. Looky here. This is Ezra, my friend. I was showing him around the house."
"Oh, you didn't have to show him my son's room, Emmett. That room is dear to me," Yolene said.
"Julius is dead, Yolene. Make peace with that. Let it go,"
Emmett responded. Yolene was all too sensitive about the passing of her son Julius. She also did not want to have a confrontation with Emmett so soon after his release from prison, especially in front of company. And so Yolene bit down her tongue, swallowed her anger, and walked outside to the backyard to feed her dogs. The 3 pit bulls had belonged to Julius before he died due to gun violence. Julius had fell victim to the street life. Yolene took exceptional care of Julius's 3 pit bulls. It was the least she could do in memory of her son. Day 7. The fair comes to town offering roller coaster rides, funnel cakes, and just plain old fun. Yolene, Emmett, and Ezra were in attendance. Emmett made it a point to hold hands with Yolene as they made their rounds around the fair. Yolene enjoyed the feeling of holding hands as well as all the public displays of affection she was receiving from Emmett. It had been so long since she experienced this level of affection from a man. Ever since Wilbert died, Yolene had been lonely. Yolene was relieved. Emmett had been finally coming out of his shell. This was the most he touched her since he was released from prison. The two were enjoying each other's company, laughing and giggling at one another's jokes. Everyone was having fun, with the exception of Ezra, Yolene noticed. Ezra followed Yolene and Emmett around the fair, but he kept his distance, always walking several paces behind them. Every time Yolene turned around to make eye contact, Ezra would turn away. Ezra was fast in turning away his head. Yolene would never catch him, but she could swear he was mean-mugging her. "What is wrong with your little friend?" Yolene had asked Emmett.
"Don't worry about him. He good.
Emmett responded. On the ride back to Yolene's house, no one spoke. Not Emmett, not Ezra. Yolene tried to make conversation, but they both kept quiet. Yolene drove the car, Emmett sat shotgun, and Ezra sat in the back seat. Ezra avoided making eye contact with Yolene in the rearview mirror, but she could see the nasty expression on his face. He was not happy. Emmett no longer showed interest in her. All the affection that he was showing her dissipated. It all started when she came out of the restroom right before they left the fair. Emmett and Ezra was having a conversation. It appeared as if they were arguing, but they both stopped talking the second she walked up to them. Once they arrived at the house, Ezra stomped his way into Julius's old bedroom and slammed the door behind him. Without saying a word, Emmett followed Ezra into the room. He opened up Julius's old door and gently closed it behind himself. Yolene stood in the middle of the living room alone and perplexed. She wasn't sure what to make of what just happened. Day 8. This was trash day. Yolene was pleasantly surprised to find all the trash was taken out of the kitchen and brought out to the front of the yard for the trash man to dispose of. This was one of the benefits of having a man around the house. She no longer had to worry about taking out the trash. Her mood would suddenly change, though. The trash man had walked up to the house, rang the doorbell, and he started to complain to Yolene. He told her he was able to get all the extra trash into the waste truck, but next time she should really consider separating all the recyclables from regular trash. Yolene was confused. What extra trash could the trash man be talking about?
My apologies, sir. We were clearing out a room, making more space. But we know for next time not to do it again. You ain't gotta worry about that. You have my word.
Emmett had overheard the trash man complaining, and he came out and interjected. The trash man gave him his appreciation and left on his way. Something about this trash incident bothered Yolene. It was unlike for the trash man to come up and complain. It bothered her, but she let it go. And then midway through the day, the thought seized her. When Julius died, Yolene had never cleared out his room. All his possessions remained in there untouched. Emmett had been spending a lot of time in that room. Did you throw away Julius's things? Yolene had asked Emmett. Emmett had just finished using the bathroom, and he was walking right back into Julius's room when Yolene asked him the question.
Let it go,
Emmett responded. He stepped into the room and shut the door before she could respond. Day 9. Yolene spent half a day outside interacting and playing with her pit bulls. They were her babies. She spent her time how she wanted because she didn't have a job. Yolene was receiving disability checks. It wasn't much money, barely over the line of poverty, but she made it work. Yolene was a widow. Her husband Wilbert had died long before Emmett was released from prison. Wilbert had paid off the house before he died, and he left the house to Yolene in his will. Living rent-free and mortgage-free was what allowed Yolene to survive just off of her disability checks. Yolene only had enough money to feed herself and her 3 pit bulls. But now there was a total of 3 dogs and 3 humans eating from the same budget. It didn't take long for Yolene to realize that Ezra moved himself into Julius's old room with Emmett's blessings. Emmett didn't even bother consulting Yolene about it. And that's why they threw away Julius's things to make room for their own. Yolene was infuriated. The thought bothered her all day. Her pit bulls were the only distraction. She was now standing in her master bathroom, a bathroom that was off limits to the other men, or so she thought. Yolene had undressed herself to take a shower after spending so much time with her dogs outside. Yolene was lost in thought, contemplating the audacity, the nerve of Emmett and Ezra. They thought they could just move into her house and do whatever the hell they wanted to do. As her bare feet took steps towards her shower, something sharp pricked the bottom of her foot. The sudden pain seized her attention. Upon observation, Yolene realized that someone came into her bathroom, clipped their dirty toenails, and left it all on the bathroom floor for her to clean up. Day 10. Yolene confronts Emmett. Ezra's nowhere to be found. I'ma need y'all to get y'all things and go, Yolene said. What? Why? Emmett asked. Y'all eating up my food, getting on my nerves. Ain't enough money to support y'all grown men.
Yolene responded, Don't worry about money. I got that under control.
Emmett said. How? You got a job? Yolene asked. I don't think so.
Don't need a job,
Emmett said with an even tone. The two of them had been sitting and having a conversation on Yolene's front porch.
I'm taking over operations.
Taking over operations? Yolene responded confused. What are you talking about, Emmett?
Don't play stupid with me, Yolene. We smell what you got growing in that second room.
Emmett responded angrily. Emmett was right. Yolene used hydroponics and ultraviolet light to grow her own personal stash indoors. Her setup in the room was not complicated. It was very simple. It took her a few years to actually figure out how to successfully grow a plant, but she managed to do it. Just 'cause a lady was on a tight budget doesn't mean that she couldn't blow strong, burn grass, and kick smoke. Yolene preferred the organic route. She preferred to self-medicate rather than taking the synthetic pills that they gave her for her back on disability. It's a lot cheaper to grow it yourself rather than buying from the plug if you know what you are doing. And at this point, Yolene knew exactly what she was doing. Absolutely not, nigga, Yolene said. You can't afford to go back to prison. You just got out. And I ain't going to prison for none of y'all. So leave my stash alone, you understand? Emmett snorted.
Too late. We already busted down, sold a couple bags. Matter of fact, Ezra running a play for me right now.
You mean to tell me that y'all broke into my spare room, which I secured with lock and key, but y'all went in there to steal my stash so y'all could sell it and make money? Yolene said with absolute fury.
I told you not to worry about money, didn't I?
Emmett responded with just as much anger. Yolene's right eye twitched involuntarily at the corners as she stared at Emmett. Without saying a word, Yolene left Emmett on the front porch and went into the house. She was so tempted to lock the door behind her and keep him outside, keep him from getting into the house, but she knew it wouldn't do her any good. Emmett would probably break through a window or something to get in. Yolene needed to figure out a way to get these two men out of her house so that she could reclaim her peace. Day 11. Yolene remained in her room the majority of the day. She only left the room to feed her dogs and prepare just enough food for herself. Removing Emmett and Ezra from her house was her top priority. She knew that if she simply just told them to get out, they wouldn't listen. And so she had to get creative in making them miserable living with her. That way they would come to the conclusion on their own that they needed to move out. Yolene had reveled in her thoughts all day, but now the day was over. The sun had set. It was time to sleep. Yolene was lying in bed. Her eyelids was halfway drooped. Slumber was about to take her. Suddenly, without warning, her bedroom door swings open. Ezra steps in without knocking. He then says, Emmett needs you to fetch him a pack of cigarettes. Ezra's sudden intrusion startled Yolene, but there was something even more startling to her. First of all, Yolene started, you got some nerve busting in my room like that without knocking. Second, you can talk? Yolene had not heard Ezra utter a single word ever since she met him. All she received from him was stares, and now here he was, finally talking. And I ain't nobody's pet dog. Yolene continued speaking. Tell Emmett to go fetch his own damn cigarettes. Matter of fact, won't you fetch it? Now get the hell out of my room and don't you slam that door. Yolene finished. Yolene could read the anger in Ezra's face, but she didn't care. He had some nerve busting in her room like that, demanding that she go grab Emmett a pack of cigarettes. Ezra stared at Yolene with disdain before he said, Where are your car keys? Excuse me? None of you motherfuckers got a license and you expect me to give you my car? Get the hell out of my room! Ezra for a moment stared at Yolene with the most vile expression, and then he stepped out of the room, slamming the door as hard as he could possibly slam it. He had slammed the door so hard that it knocked a few paintings off of Yolene's bedroom wall. With fury, Yolene jumps out of bed and drags her heaviest dresser in front of the bedroom door to keep it from opening up again. She did not want either of the two men to sneak back into her room while she slept and make out with her car keys. Emmett had not slept in the same bedroom as she did ever since Ezra came around. The two men slept in Julius's old bedroom. So if Emmett came to her room and knocked on the door asking to come in to sleep, she'll tell him off. The lock on Yolene's bedroom door did not work. It needed to be replaced. Her dresser would only be effective in keeping them out so long as she was inside the room. But once she left, she knew that her room would be exposed. Day 12. Yolene returned home from the hardware store with a brand new lock for her door. Emmett and Ezra were both in the living room. Emmett sat on the sofa watching TV. His shirt was off, revealing all of his gang-affiliated tattoos. He had a bunch of cuts and scars on his skin, too. For a man who was 57 years old, Emmett was still muscular. Ezra was the total opposite of Emmett. He was tall where Emmett was short. He was light-skinned where Emmett was dark-skinned. He barely had any tattoos where Emmett was covered in tattoos. Emmett was bald. Ezra had shoulder-length hair. Emmett had a beard. Ezra had no facial hair. Emmett was old where Ezra was young. Yolene suspected that Ezra was probably 25 years old. They were total opposites, and at present, they sat opposite from each other. Emmett was sitting on the sofa, and Ezra was sitting on the ottoman. Ezra was rubbing Emmett's feet as Emmett watched TV. When Yolene walked into the house, the three of them stared at each other in awkward silence. Yolene noticed that Emmett's bare feet had long toenails, which indicated to her that he had not clipped his toenails in a long time. And by the process of elimination, Yolene understood precisely who had clipped their dirty toenails and left them in her bathroom. Without speaking, Yolene went in her room and shut the door.